Welcome back to another segment. Starting to have so many of these, I'm starting to forget what I've talked about and what I haven't. But I haven't talked about this specifically. So I want to get into a quote by Jacob Needleman. Needleman was a professor of philosophy at San Francisco State University and the author of a number of books, but the real groundbreaking book that he wrote in 1994 was Money and the Meaning of Life. And I remember listening to him at the, must have been it was the ICFP retreat at the time. It's before the Financial Planning Association was formed in 1995 in San Diego. And that was kind of a big year personally for me because I turned 40 and kind of figured that life was now almost over. And I turned 40 at the retreat in San Diego, listening to Jacob Needleman and Olivia Mellon, who was also kind of the grandmother of financial therapy. So his idea that money, while it will not give a person meaning in life, there is extraordinarily little likelihood that we will find meaning in our lives without it. That was pretty revolutionary. So his position is that the purpose of money is to serve and support the search for meaning in our lives. So that's really foundational to financial life planning, to financial therapy. And as a financial life planner and a financial therapist, we spend a lot of time with clients really drilling down on what makes life worth living. What are my desires and goals? And the goals part goes way deeper than just, well, what are your goals? Lift them off. Most of us don't know what our heartfelt goals and life aspirations are without some reflection and some work. We know what the goals for society for us say they should be, what our parents said our goals and aspirations should be, what our children think our goals and aspirations should be. Lots of shoulds and lots of oughts, right? What lights my heart on fire? What lights your heart on fire? That will bring meaning and worth living to your life. And that is what our money, what our financial plan needs to support. So Needleman in that book wrote, we got to take money seriously. And his contention was that humans are hardwired with two general conditions: the need to survive and the quest for meaning. And that follows the pyramid of where at the bottom of our pyramid are our basic needs for survival. At the top of the pyramid is coming into self-awareness and seeking what the higher purpose for our life is. Obviously, material needs have got to be satisfied before we can have any search for meaning. Search for meaning is, I guess, to some degree, a privilege, right? Because a search for meaning probably means I'm clothed, I'm fed, I live in safe shelter, and my survival needs are not a real issue. When somebody is hungry, when they are sick, when they are not in a physically safe environment, or I would suppose even an emotionally unsafe environment, it's really hard, if not impossible, to be worried about what's meaning in my life. So definitely money will help us survive. In today's world, very few of us can survive without money. So I think that's a foregone conclusion. And we also cannot find meaning in life without money, because money touches everything we do. I don't know if I've talked on the podcast about George Kinder's 3 questions exercise, which is probably his biggest contribution to life planning, in the way that my biggest contribution is probably money scripts. And yeah, maybe sometime we'll talk about that exercise. But if you haven't done it, it's worth getting a hold of and doing it. And the answers to the very last question, whether, I mean, a lot of people say, if I only had days left to live or months left to live, what I would do is really spend more time with people who mean a lot to me. And my question is always, well, why don't you spend more time now? What do you think the answer is? Invariably, well, I got to work. I can't quit my job to spend time with people I love. And so in that manner, money touches everything. If you want to go on a spiritual retreat, if you want to go on a meditation retreat, if you want to go to a church retreat, if you want to spend time in prayer or meditation, money touches it all. So that's the bridge between survival and meaning. So in his book, he gave a quote that is really provocative. And this quote was brought to my attention recently by the fine folks at the Phonology Project. Natalie Wagner Willis and Jake Wagner, the children of Dick Wagner, who is one of the brilliant minds of financial planning, who unfortunately died at a relatively young age in, I think it was 2017. And And the quote is this: without consciousness, the part of ourselves that has to do with money, we run the risk of becoming moral or spiritual beings with only half our nature. We run the risk of dreaming our ethics and our spirituality. Now, there's a lot to unpack in that quote, and so I thought I would do that. First part of that says, without consciousness. Consciousness or awareness is at the heart of financial life planning, holistic financial planning, financial therapy. Consciousness, if we look at the stages of change by Prochaska and other authors, that lists them: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, relapse, and they call it termination, which is you finally made it. Pre-contemplation is not a place of consciousness. That is where we start with usually making any change, as we're not even aware that a change is needed. So contemplation is the stage of change where we're coming into consciousness. We're becoming aware. Being aware is the start of any personal, professional, or financial transformation. It's crucial. We don't know what we don't know. So we've got to wake up to what we don't know to begin any change in our lives. Consciousness, if you think about it, is a bedrock of almost every spiritual tradition that I can think of. It's becoming present. So in the terms of the Enneagram, for those of you that follow that, when Russ Hudson teaches the Enneagram, he starts at the top, not the bottom, of the various personality, listing what it's like to have that personality and to be healthy. And in every one of those is presence and essence, being completely awake to what is in the here and now, not living in the past, not living in the future, right now. I used to love the term carpe diem, seize the day, which is about being present, being in the moment. So whether it's Christianity or Buddhism or almost any spiritual tradition, there is something to be said for being awake, being aware, being plugged in to a higher power. That would be true in the 12-step programs. So this is important. Walking through life unconsciously is typically, I think, the consequence of living an unfulfilled life. And being unconscious around our money is the genesis of unsound financial decisions. So becoming aware or conscious of our internal thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about money usually can result in increased financial and emotional well-being. It can result in living life more fully and a lot more satisfaction. So, consciousness is really important, but I do not want to imply that consciousness is all that's needed. It's 50% of the equation in the stages of change. Pre-contemplation, contemplation, being aware is the second step. Action is the fourth. So there's got to be action that arises from awakening, that arises from being in contemplation, that arises from being consciousness. So definitely becoming awake is the first step, but there is more steps than that into eventually living life as fully as possible. And he goes on with this quote, saying, without consciousness of the part of ourselves that has to do with money. Now, you know that I use a methodology of internal family systems with my financial therapy clients. And I just loved the fact, I mean, when I read this in 1994, I think that's about the same year that Dick Schwartz started IFS as a modality, right? So Needleman definitely had no idea of talking about the part of ourselves, which is kind of almost universal, that language, the part of ourselves. So becoming conscious of the parts of ourselves that hold our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs around money is paramount to financial well-being. So when we do the money scripts exercise and the money egg and the money atom, and we start learning our story around money, we're looking at, we're coming into awareness or finding trailheads that will lead us to parts of ourselves that have to do with how we approach money. So in case you haven't listened to me talk much about internal family systems, it's a therapeutic modality, and it views our internal system as a family of parts. Family systems therapy looks out at your actual family and says we're all a product of the families and the dynamics of the families we were raised in. That there's no bad family members or family members that if we could just get rid of that family member, or if we could just get that one family member healed, everything would be okay. It looks like at a healing of the system because there's all sorts of contributions, functionally and dysfunctionally, that the members of the family make. So IFS just flips that internally within us. It says we all have subpersonalities within us, or parts. And you probably can relate to this. You know, have you ever said a part of me wants to do this and a part of me wants to do that? A part of me wants to save. A part of me wants to spend. So I just love that quote of the part of ourselves that has to do with money. And he continues on that we run the risk. So if we don't become conscious of that part of ourselves that has to do with money, and I would probably put in parts, plural, we run the risk of becoming moral or spiritual beings with only half of our nature. We run the risk of dreaming our ethics and our spirituality. So the way I frame this is that unless the parts of ourselves that carry our money scripts, our financial traumas, that manage our financial responsibilities within our system are awakened or come into consciousness, we will likely sleepwalk through many aspects of our life. So in IFS terms, those managers that are managing the money and making those decisions oftentimes are making decisions to protect the parts of ourselves that are wounded, that have suffered financial trauma or trauma of some type, and are making decisions to protect that part from feeling anything. And typically those decisions, while they may have worked when we were young, they aren't working today. For example, I've had a couple of clients who couldn't save, couldn't, very intelligent people that could not save. When we traced back where that came from, in a couple of cases, it came from they, as kids, saved a lot of money for a kid, and their parents stole it and used it for other things. And they'd save again, and their parents would steal it. And they came up with the extreme belief that if you don't spend your money, you will never get any benefit out of it. When you get it, spend it. Well, that made perfect sense, didn't it? And it would make perfect sense of that manager, because what happened when their money disappeared? Would that be hurtful? Would that be confusing? Would that feel like a violation? Well, of course it would. And so that part of us that was just devastated and hurt and confused and felt so, their need of trust and their need of stability not being met, that the manager says, okay, we're not going there again. You're never going to feel that again. We will just spend that money so you won't be so hurt. So that's just one of thousands of ways that these managers protect these vulnerable parts of ourselves. So unless we can find a way to reach those vulnerable parts of ourselves and help them release the extreme burden and feel the feelings around that vulnerability and come to understand that things have changed in life, we will continue to repeat that over and over and over. And that's what Needleman meant by sleepwalking through many aspects of our life, that we'd be dreaming our reality around money than being fully awake to reality, living in the here and now. We are still trapped back in the time that trauma happened, back at time as kids. And so we dream our ethics, our spirituality. We dream that our money scripts are correct, that they're true. So he says if we don't awaken to this, there'll be no connection between money, emotion, body, or spirit. It's really doubtful that our money is going to support our quest for meaning in this condition. So Needleman suggests that we need to start building consciousness around our beliefs about money, and that we need to examine all the opinions we have about money. Now, he didn't know about money scripts, but he said this, and it was in a later speech to the FPA, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago maybe. He compared our beliefs about money to an antique store where occasionally you'll find a priceless treasure. But for the most part, it's filled with junk. I couldn't agree more. My wife loves antique stores. She would disagree. And so he contends that we need to open the contents of our minds and examine our opinions and beliefs about money and ask each one, how did you get in here? That is just beautiful and so spot on with what we do when we are looking at our money scripts. When you've taken the KSMI-R, say, which is only a 10-minute evaluation, and you can start seeing some of the foundational money scripts in your life. Most all of us, when we expand that exercise, will have 50 to 200 opinions, beliefs about money. And it is so beneficial to go through every one and ask, how did you get in here? Which is simply asking the part of ourselves that holds that belief to tell me, where did you get this belief? When did it start? How did it get in there, right? So I just, like I said, I love that quote. It is so incredibly insightful. So if you haven't started your money journey to examine all of your opinions on money, I would encourage you to do so. It's not a fast process. It's actually a process that is really ongoing, right? But a wonderful way to do this is to find a financial therapist that can help you with that, or find a financial therapist that also practices internal family systems and that can help you start unpack all of your parts, stories and traumas and beliefs that they have around money, and helping to heal parts of ourselves, to release those extreme burdens, those extreme money scripts, and begin to build flexibility around them. And we can not only become more aware and conscious, we can actually begin changing the problematic financial behaviors that can keep so many of us poor, in anxiety, making unsound financial decisions. So, thank you. Thanks again for all your comments. Thanks for all of you around the world that are listening to this podcast. Always love to hear your thoughts around anything. So you can always email me at rick@rickkaler.com. So take care.